Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for having me here. Um, so I'm mostly going to be talking about MMOs today because that's kind of my specialty. But there'll be a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions about MMIs itself or the whole application for medicine or what being a medical student is like at UCL, then obviously ask those sort of questions, but generally this is going to be focused on MMIs. Um, if you're in year 13, obviously, like all of this is very applicable for you. And I'll also be talking about my website towards the end because like that's very helpful for year 13s to do mock MMI practice in their own time, and I highly recommend you guys to do that. If you're in year 12, like even though this is probably more applicable for year 13s right now because they're thinking about MMIs, it's still worth being here because having insight into MMIs is very important, especially because when you do work experience and stuff like that, you kind of know what sort of things that you're looking for. So therefore, when you do go into practicing MMIs and going into your interviews, you already know what sort of things to talk about based off your experiences during year 12. So let's just quickly talk about myself. So my name is Matthew, and I'm a second year UCL medical student. In terms of what I'm doing right now at UCL, I'm about to start a module on neuroscience and stuff to do with brain anatomy and basically just in general neurology. I attended a non selective state school, which is quite important to understand that you don't have to go to a really, uh, I guess, top school. You don't need to go to grammar school. You don't need to go to a private school to get into medicine. It's definitely not I guess, a diss on anyone that goes to any of those schools. It's just to reiterate that like as long as you're passionate enough for medicine and you have the academic qualities, you'll be able to get into medicine no matter what sort of background you're from. My current interest is sports med and orthopedics, and at UCL we do something called a IBSc, which is where you study a different degree for 1 year and you end up getting a full degree from it. What I want to study is sports and exercise medicine. I also post a lot on LinkedIn. You probably have seen some of my posts before. And in terms of interviews itself, you can trust me because from every university that offered me interviews, I gained an offer. So I definitely know what I'm talking about. I feel like I'm very confident at what I'm talking about, and I know exactly what universities are looking for in candidates at the interview stage. And I recently launch MMI Trainer, which I'll talk about later. So, in terms of the structure of the talk, I'll just be giving a brief overview of MMIs, why they're so important, also the question types, my sort of tips for each question type and example questions. Because there isn't a huge amount of people here, we can make this session quite interactive. So, I'll probably get you guys to talk on the chat to respond to some of the questions and stuff like that. And then I'll talk about it on my trainer, and then I'll give a summary, and then there'll be a Q&A. In terms of having questions, if you have questions along the way, feel free to put in the chat because I have my iPad also that has joined the call, so I'll be able to look at the chat as well. If the questions aren't really relevant for the particular topic that I'm talking about at that stage, I'll just answer it at the end. But hopefully that is clear. So, first question for all of you guys, like, what do you actually know about MMIs? So just pop in a chat, even if it's like very little knowledge or if it's a huge amount of knowledge, like go for it. Let's have a look. They are short stations with different interviewers. Yep, that's correct. Multiple stations, yeah. Different stations, 5 to 7 minutes, yeah. That's good. Can involve role play, yeah. We'll definitely be talking about role plays. Got anything else? Transferable skills. Yeah, that's good. Okay, I think it seems like you guys like have a good idea of kind of what MMIs are all about. So I'm just going to quickly give a brief overview of MMIs. Some of you probably know a lot about MMIs already, so I won't dwindle on this for too long. But it stands for multiple mini interviews. It's by far the most popular format for interviews for medicine and dentistry in the UK. It's also popular in other countries like Australia does it, New Zealand, Canada. I think some US schools are starting to do it as well. It's popular in Singapore. So it's a very popular format. And the reason why is because of the amount of skills they can test at each station. In terms of the stations themselves, they contain different themes, and the stations can vary in amount and also in length. So it's usually between 5 to 8 for both. And you always have a small brief in the beginning, so you kind of have an idea of the scenario or the theme of the station, and it gives you a bit of time to prepare as well. So this is like a list of like all the medical schools. Really, the only thing that you need to know is basically all medical schools do MMIs at an undergraduate level. It's a bit different if you're applying postgraduate, but most of you are probably looking at undergraduate. Really, the only two schools that don't is Cambridge and Oxford. And in terms of dentistry schools, all of them do MMIs. So the other format that Oxford and Cambridge does is panel interviews, and it's quite traditional. So it's kind of like a job interview. You're in front of one or two interviewers, and they ask you questions, and it's a bit of a conversation. But how they usually do it is they do it more on academics. So usually you have two interviews, and there's one that tends to be science based, and the other one is more clinical practice based. But it kind of depends on what college you applied for. Okay, so this is basically just to understand like why MMIs are so important. If you're in year 13, this is the most important part of your application at this point. Like I know people who've gotten 4 interviews and don't get an offer because they just don't understand the importance of it. At the end of the day, MMIs and interviews themselves, they're the one thing that will decide whether you get an offer or not. It basically separates people who are academically strong with people who are built for medicine and dentistry. Because at the end of the day, medicine and dentistry are not only uh, like applying the knowledge of science, but you also need to have those interdisciplinary skills and those people skills in order to interact with patients, with other colleagues, and stuff like that. In terms of MMIs themselves, it can be daunting, but with enough practice, you should be able to succeed. And it's very important you do practice because at the end of the day, everyone who gets an interview is academically good enough to do medicine or dentistry. Really, the only thing that does separate you is those people skills. So it's important that you really do practice MMIs for sure. So I'm going to start talking about the MMI question types and breaking them down, giving examples, and also what advice I have for that. These are the general skills that MMIs assess. So you can obviously read there, it's motivations for medicine slash dentistry, ethical reasoning. This involves 4 pillars: decision making, critical thinking, and analytical problem solving, teamwork. I mean, you can kind of see it. It's kind of the sort of things that you expect to see in healthcare professionals, and that's basically what MMIs tend to assess. The one thing to note is each station could assess more than one of these skills at once. And it's also not limited to these skills, but these are generally the main skills that they do try and assess, skills and qualities. In terms of the question types, these are what I would say the main question types. So they could be broken down into 7 categories. So the first one's like the classic questions. So this is like, why do you want to study medicine? What skills and qualities do you have? And then stuff on your personal statement. They're kind of the things that you expect to come up. Then there's sometimes some analysis questions. So this could be a data interpretation or just describing an image, for example. Another one is situational questions, which is where you're given a scenario and you basically have to talk your way through it, how you would approach particular scenarios, different things. This could be clinical or non-clinical. And then the role play is almost like an application of a situational question, which is when you're literally acting it out. So, for example, you can have an actor that's a patient and you have to deal with, I don't know, let's say breaking bad news to that patient. And that's a very popular question type. And at some universities, they often offer double the marks for this because there's so many skills that comes into this. Yeah. Another one that's quite popular is obscure questions, which is like it's very unconventional questions, and they basically try to catch you out on the spot. But it's basically trying to assess your way of, uh, I guess, thinking your way through. Can you think outside the box? What sort of qualities you have? That's kind of the purpose of this, because I mean, in healthcare, anything can happen, so you have to be prepared for something abnormal to happen, and that's why obscure questions are very popular in MMIs as well. In terms of hot topic questions, you probably know they're quite popular. That's why during year 12 and even in like the beginning year 13 and stuff, you need to be keeping up with healthcare news. And even when you're in medical school, you kind of have to keep up with it, mainly because healthcare is always evolving. There's always new research, there's always new things to discover, there's always new like laws, for example. There's new ways that healthcare is being adapted and evolving. And it's very important that you stay on top of this because you don't want to end up being outdated or not doing the best thing for your patients. And another question type is calculations. This isn't really popular, but I do know universities that do calculation questions. It's, I would say it's quite unlikely you'd get something like calculations in your MMI station, but it's definitely important to be aware of this because I have seen it come up. I won't say where because I'm not allowed, but I have seen it before. Okay, classic questions. So to break down classic questions, they are guaranteed to come up, and it could involve your personal statement. And like, if you're going into your interview and not prepared to answer classic questions, then I would probably say you're screwed because you should expect this to come up no matter what. And at least one classic question will come up in your MMI. So so for example, you can see there, why do you want to study medicine, not dentistry? That could be one. Or tell me about a time you demonstrated leadership. Tell me about a research project you did. And they're very classic examples. The sort of advice that I have for you guys is don't necessarily memorize your answers, but definitely have ideas of things that you want to talk about, but just be as authentic and genuine as possible because like it flows better, it sounds better, and it makes you sound less like a robot as well. In terms of how to structure classic questions, if you're like having to describe an experience, I would use the STAR structure. So STAR is broken down as an abbreviation of situation. So what is the scenario? Task. So what is your role? What are you doing in this situation? The action. So what did you do? So or what did you see someone else do? Because this could also be for work experience, for example. Um, and then your response. Not your response, the response of the scenario. So what actually happened following this action? Did the situation improve, for example? And then also a reflection. So explaining what did you learn and also how has this shaped your suitability for medicine, for example. And some example questions are at the bottom. So tell me about a time you failed, or tell me about an event that happened in your work experience. That I would strongly recommend using the STAR structure because that ensures that your answer flows very well. Okay, so next question type is analysis questions. So as I mentioned before, it's usually a data or a picture question. In terms of how to structure these questions, you should start off with the basic stuff about the data. So what type of data presentation is it? So is it a graph? Is it a table? Is it a chart? And basically state exactly what it is. Then state the obvious, so stuff like what is the title, what is the x-axis, the units, what is the y-axis, also the general trend. So is it, I don't know, positive correlation, for example? Like, obviously, just state the absolute obvious, but just don't miss anything out because they want you to be accurate. Basically, explain the graph as if no one has seen it before. And also, if there's any changes in data, outliers, plateaus, any sudden changes, mention them as well, and always give context. So, what does this actually mean for this? So, if it's talking about the effects of vaccination uptake and, I don't know, let's say rates of COVID, if there appears to be a decrease in COVID cases following a vaccination like program, then you can talk about how that might have affected that. However, it's very important that you don't conclude that correlation is causation, because, for example, like with the COVID example I just gave, like as much as we know that vaccines are very good at preventing new cases, other reasons could also play a factor, such as people have better understanding of COVID. They know that they need to isolate. They know they need to wash their hands, stuff like that. Those things can also affect the results as well. So never conclude that correlation equals causation. All right, I'm gonna now talk about images. So with image questions, always start with the obvious. What do you see in the image? Is there, for example, a young person? Is there an old person? Are you looking at a field? Usually, it's sometimes like these images could be completely irrelevant to healthcare, but they just want to see your analytical skills and your ability to explain things to other people. And once you've stated the obvious things, go into more detail. So if it is an image, use the five senses. Like what are you seeing, or what is the person seeing? What is maybe the person hearing in that picture? Maybe what they're feeling. If they're eating anything, what are they tasting? And also maybe what are they touching? And then also just remember there is no wrong answers with this, because you can you're able to justify your answers based on what you see, as long as you use evidence on the image, as long as it's not far-fetched, then no matter what you say, it's not going to be wrong. But don't be too obvious, and don't like miss out any particular details, because it's very important to state everything that you see in the image. Okay, right, so I have an example of an analysis question. um, Let's start off with question one, describing the graph. Can you guys have a go at answering this question based on what I said on how to structure this answer? So thinking about what the title is, what do you see, what's the X, Y axis, unit, stuff like that. And don't be afraid if you think you might guess it wrong either. It's a safe space. Has anyone typed anything in the chat? I wouldn't worry too much about writing the full answer. Just some ideas of the things to talk about for this question. General trends and increase. Oh, is the image blurry? Okay. All right, completely fine. That's the case. Yeah, the general trend is an increase. Yeah, is it better now? Okay. Okay, maybe my connection's a little bit weak. Um, yeah, that's good. Yeah, number of cases against the date of anyone started. Yes. Obviously, it's a little bit blurry, but with the title, obviously mention what the disease is as well. Increased cases in 2019 than 18. Yeah, that's correct. So yeah, in like April sort of time, that's kind of the peak confirmed cases. Um, Ebola virus disease, yes, absolutely, it's Ebola. Uh, Obviously, as well, make sure you mention the keys as well. So, for example, the light blue is probable, and then confirmed is dark blue. So, always consider the keys as well with these questions. And then also, that is cumulative, the black line. So, cumulative is very good at explaining where is the biggest increase in cases. So, for example, the cumulative sort of from May 2019 ish. I don't know why it says May. I think that's actually wrong, but should be March. But you can see it's a lot steeper, which suggests that the number of cases has increased at a faster rate during this time. And then obviously towards the end it plateaus as well. And then you can mention as well cumulative number of cases. So that means the total number of cases is like 3,500. What would a model answer say? Okay, all right. I'll go through the model answer. So first thing you mention is the title. So the title is all of the graph is, well, it's a mixture of a cumulative line graph and a bar graph, which shows the number of cases of Ebola virus in Democratic Republic of Congo, and then this is between 30th of April 2018 to November 17th, 2019. The x-axis, it shows the dates and months, and then the y-axis on the left is number of cases, and then on the right is cumulative number of cases. And in terms of how much it goes up by, the number of cases, it goes up by 20, and the cumulative number of cases goes up by 500. In terms of the general trend, you can see for confirmed cases, it goes up towards about 29th of April, somewhere April region. That's where the maximum number of cases are, around 120, and then it goes down all the way until November to basically less than, looks like, 8 cases, maybe 5 cases. For cumulative, the general trend, it goes up. However, its gradient is steepest in April 2019 to the end of May, sort of, and then it plateaus from maybe about August to November. And in terms of any dips in confirmed cases, there's a minor dip in February to just before March time in 2019. So those are the sort of things that you kind of have to talk about, basically. And if you say all of those particular things, that shows that it's very. What are the interviewers trying to see? Okay, so what they're actually looking for is firstly analytical skills, but also being accurate and your ability to describe something where the other person like almost hasn't seen it. So you basically have to assume that the interviewer hasn't seen the graph. You have to describe it as if they've never seen the graph at all. Is that a mark sheet that interview? Yes, there is a mark scheme. What I'll do is I'll show you my website to explain basically what the mark scheme sort of looks like, but I'll show that a little bit later. But hopefully that kind of makes sense in terms of like how to structure your answers for this. I'm just having a quick look at the time. So, what do you believe has caused the plateau of cumulative cases? So, this is an open question. for anyone? What do you think can cause a plateau cumulative cases? So in other words, what do you think could cause Ebola cases or new Ebola cases to decrease? Herd immunity to Ebola, more people got, yeah, that's a good one. Herd immunity or vaccinations, yeah, that could be one. Any other ideas? Yeah, better public awareness, that's good. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think that's, to be fair, that's kind of hits all of the ideas of what could cause a disease to, I guess, decrease in general. It tends to be some sort of prevention, maybe better awareness, better uh, um, hygiene as well. So yeah, I'll probably say maybe vaccines could be one, better awareness. So like people knows that they need to isolate, and then also mention maybe hygiene improves as well. So people like washes their hands and stuff like that. And yeah, that's good. All right, and then for the third question, some people are vaccine hesitant. So how would you deal with a patient who is unsure whether to take a vaccine or not? So obviously this question isn't exactly related to the graph, but you can see how one station can assess more than one skill. So this is actually assessing, well, stuff on how do you interact with a patient, basically. So how would you approach someone who's vaccine hesitant? Yeah, that's good. That's a good starting point. So inform them of the consequences of taking and not taking the vaccines. Yeah. So it's very important that the patient is well informed, but obviously the choice is theirs because they have autonomy over themselves. They have the right to self-determination. So you're absolutely correct. Any other ideas? Okay. All right. So in terms of other things that you could think about, so your first approach would be to find out why they're vaccine hesitant actually, because that doesn't necessarily confirm much. We don't know why. It could be maybe someone close to them has had a bad experience of vaccines, or they're scared of needles. That could also be one. It could be that they've had some misinformation. People who are vaccine hesitant, I would like you wouldn't describe them as uninformed, but often, like especially those who are anti-vax. When I mean anti-vax, I mean like are like always against vaccines and stuff like that. It tends to be they're more misinformed, if anything. But it's very important you listen to what the patient's saying. Make sure it's led by them if you're having a consultation, and figure out why they are vaccine hesitant. If it's because they're scared of needles, then you can use make things like numbing spray to make it less painful, for example. Like think about ways that you can ease the pain. Um, but if it's because they're scared of the side effects of vaccines, then yes, it's obviously very important that you make it clear what is the potential side effects and stuff, and also think about uh, telling them how taking the vaccine is most likely to be beneficial for them, because at the end of the day, like as healthcare professionals, or future healthcare professionals, you would have better understanding of the benefits compared to someone who's potentially vaccine hesitant. What's the question? Do you interview graded by how many of you possibly? Not. I mean, to some extent, like if you don't say anything or if you say stuff that's, I guess, irrelevant or whatever, then yes, they're going to judge ideas and views. But really, they just want to see that you hit particular marking points, and uh, I guess like because there's particular things you have to talk about in these scenarios, and then like if you don't mention particular things, it just won't flow correctly and it won't seem sincere or that you know what to do in that situation. Talk about herd immunity for the question. Are you on about in terms of question 2 or question 3? I think actually, yeah, for question 3, you could probably talk about herd immunity, but you're kind of trying to speak to them on a personal level as to why they don't want to take a vaccine, and I think herd immunity just makes it too general. So maybe it's not the best thing to talk about, but it's not wrong to talk about it maybe because that talks about why it's beneficial to take the vaccine for everyone, if that makes sense. But really, the main things that you need to talk about is basically exploring why they don't want to take the vaccine, and then talking about maybe ways that you can combat it. So, and then also explaining benefits, cons of taking, or like the potential side effects or whatever. Make sure that they are well informed, that they have the right for autonomy and self determination. But also, if they don't want to take the vaccine, give them ways. You should still show them support in the way that you should tell them ways to prevent getting the disease. So if it was COVID, for example, you tell them wash your hands and stuff like that, have good hygiene, self isolate, those sort of things. That's how you prevent getting COVID. Vaccines is just like a way to prevent, but there is still other ways to prevent getting the disease as well. So should we talk about the patient themselves first and then more generally? Uh, yeah, I guess so, yes. I mean, at the end of the day, like your consultation with a patient is, and also the sort of things you talk about with your patient is to do with the patient. Healthcare is patient centered. You have to adapt the scenario based on the person that you're dealing with. Hopefully that kind of answers that question. I'm going to move on just because of time, because we still have quite a lot of stuff to get through. So for situational questions, so they can be clinical or non-clinical, and kind of the idea with it is to follow the GMC guidelines. So basically, would you make a good healthcare professional, or in this case for GMC, a good medical student slash doctor? And you need to demonstrate good decision making. And it's also important to know some medical laws. Two main examples is duty of candor and Gillick competency. Do any of you know what those mean? If you do, please type in the chat. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so Gillick competency is assessing children under 16 if they can consent. Yes, absolutely. That's absolutely correct. What about duty of candor? Okay, so duty of candor is basically you have to be open and honest with a patient if a mistake is made. Um, I I don't know if you guys might have heard of the Mid Staffordshire, I guess, disaster, which is basically where duty of candor came from, and that's basically a scenario where there was inadequate healthcare and it led to several deaths, which could easily been prevented, and the main reason why it happened is because that trust wanted to look favourable. Um, but what came out of this is this law called duty of candor, which means no matter like what the mistake is, you have to be open, honest with the patient. It's a legal obligation. So if anything ever goes wrong or a mistake is made, you have to be honest with the patient. To prep for interviews, yeah, absolutely. I would definitely read GMC guidelines to prep for interviews. I don't expect anyone to memorize it. Like, to put it lightly, I haven't memorized it, and I don't think most medical students would have memorized it at all. But it's definitely worth having a read to understand the sort of things that is expected of healthcare professionals. I would say most of it generally is somewhat common sense, but there is some things that might contradict your personal values to the values of like healthcare professionals. So it's definitely worth having a read. But generally, like if you don't really know what to do in a scenario, when in doubt, use 4 pillars of medical ethics. So beneficence, non-maleficence, autonomy, and justice. So always refer to those. Uh, and also, if you feel incompetent in a situation, always ask for help. Always ask for help. Like if you don't know something, ask another healthcare professional or ask someone with more experience than you. Like that's always a good thing if you feel like you don't know what to do. And also just work within your capacity. So think, would you be able to do something about it? I mean, if you're, for example, a medical student, you cannot diagnose someone. You're not competent enough to. So you wouldn't be expected to do that, for example. Or if you haven't had first aid training before, you're not expected to be able to know that or how to do that. So don't do it. Like get someone who can. Those are the sort of things that you have to think about in those particular scenarios. Uh, these are some example questions. We're not going to go through them because of time, but an example of a situation could be you are a GP and the patient is certain that they need antibiotics for their flu. What would you do in this situation? Or another one could be a patient is diagnosed with testicular cancer. How would you break the news to them? This also links quite nicely to role play questions, which is basically the same thing except from you acting out the scenario. And really, the most important skill, actually, I'll say 2 things: skills and qualities. Emphasis on empathy. So, empathy is extremely important, being able to empathize with the patient, and also your communication. So, your verbal communication is very important. So, asking things, are they comfortable? Is the patient comfortable? Asking open and closed questions, um, and also thinking about the sort of language you're using. So, if you use a bunch of big words in front of a patient to describe something, then they're not going to understand what's going on, and it can make them feel more concerned about a situation, and they won't have the adequate understanding of what's going on. So, as much as possible, simplify it without removing the meaning of something. But it's important that you convey what's going on to the patient because they need to be well informed. And also think about your non-verbal communication. So, are you eye level with the actor, doing like nodding your head, hand placements, eye contact, and also taking pauses. Give time for the actor, if they're a patient, to um, I guess think for themselves and let them speak because it's all led by the patient. As I said, healthcare is patient centered, so they should kind of be leading the consultation. Yeah, in terms of the structure for these questions, you should use the SPIKE structure. So it stands for setting. So thinking about making sure the patient is comfortable and also make sure you speak to them privately. Like you wouldn't want to break bad news in public because they'll feel really uncomfortable about hearing something bad that's happening to them or that's happened to someone. Um, Perception. So it's basically talking about what they know about what's going on. So, for example, let's say they just had blood tests. So just like asking like what have you like heard about the blood test yet, and stuff like that. Simple things like that. That's all you can talk about. And then invitation. You want to prepare the person that you're speaking to about what has happened, like ready to hear some news. Like if you just say it out of nowhere, then that will catch them off guard, and they're more likely to react badly. But if you're clear to them what you're about to talk about, then they have emotional and mental preparation for something that could happen. And this skill is called signposting, and it's a very important skill to have. Knowledge is explaining what has happened and what this means, and making this as clear as possible to them what is going on. So if it is they've been diagnosed, for example, with testicular cancer, you tell it straight to them exactly how it is. They've been described with testicular cancer, what this means, what they need to know about it. But also, it's very important once you give the news, you take a pause and you let them absorb that information, and make sure you empathize with them. Like they're going to be upset with bad news no matter what, but you don't want to aggregate them. You don't want to aggravate them at all. So give them time to open up about how they feel about the situation, or if they have any questions, and then you make sure you try to reassure them about strategies and summaries, so they kind of know what's going on next or what's the plan next, and also ensure that they haven't missed anything. So make sure you summarize what you've said and what they understand as well. So example role play questions. So an example of a non-clinical one is you break your neighbour's plant pot, break the news to him. And like the skills assessed there is basically the same thing. And then another one is a more clinical one. So you are a doctor about to tell a patient they have sickle cell anemia, break the news to her. Okay, right, we're going to talk about obscure questions. So they're very untraditional, and you can't really prepare for them, but you have to always think outside of the box. And like in terms of these questions, the best thing is just to practice them. And remember, like there's not really any wrong answers as long as you can justify what you're saying. Would you be expected to know a little about sickle cell? All right, so with these scenarios, everything that you learnt in your A levels in terms of biology or chemistry or whatever, that you like, so I'll probably say like year 12 content, you probably would be expected to know a little bit. However, if it's any new concepts, whether no you're not, they'll give you all the information you need to know about the situation, because they're not really assessing your knowledge, they're assessing your skills and qualities at the end of the day. But with things like, for example, I don't know, stuff on maybe type 2 diabetes, like they probably would expect you to know that because they know that most people would have some knowledge of that, for example, that is applying for medicine. But yeah, hopefully that kind of answers that. Would we also get questions like these role plays ones in panels too? You wouldn't do a role play in a panel, but they'll give you a scenario question. They would definitely do that for sure. Like in particular scenarios, they would probably want you to explain how you'd act particular things out. This is a general question. When we enter the Zoom meeting and injuries, actually wait for them to speak. Okay, so if it's Zoom, it depends on your instructions. I think it's always good to say hello, your name. That's just a polite thing, and also, like, you should always introduce yourself, no matter when you meet a new person or not. So if we were given a disease unknown to us, do we skip the knowledge part? No, I don't think you should. I think you should say what they have, but if you don't know anything about it, just be straight up with them. Just say that you don't understand much about it, but then you can refer them to someone who is more competent. You can say that I'm going to refer you to, I don't know, like your senior advisor or your consultant or whatever to break the bad news. So I wouldn't. I would definitely like if you summoned them, you would tell them what it is. Otherwise, you just wasted their time at the end of the day. But it's completely okay to say that you don't have enough knowledge of something. Like being open and honest with a patient or a person is always a good thing for sure. Um, but yeah. Anyway, so in terms of obscure questions, um, like there is no wrong answers. You just need to justify yourself. An example could be, why are clothes important for healthcare? Like from surface level, that seems a little bit weird, but clothes is actually quite important because it kind of visually signifies who that person is. So you have like particular clothes for patients, um, and then you have particular clothes for doctors, but like doctors on wards, so they would look more, maybe more professional and stuff like that. And it's important that they look professional because you want them to be taken seriously and stuff like that. But whereas in surgery, people will be wearing scrubs, people will be wearing like gloves and stuff like that. And the reason why they're wearing these sort of clothes is to uh, prevent any sort of contamination, and those are the sort of things they have to think about in terms of these sort of obscure questions. Like surface level, it seems a little bit weird, but you can, if you think more deeply about it, it kind of makes more sense, if that makes sense. Um, yeah. All right, and then hot topic questions, like they're very typical questions to come up on MMIs. It's important you stay up to date with healthcare. How can you get yourself to think outside the box? That's a good question. Um, I think I think with thinking outside the box, I think firstly you just think about like what's the obvious things, and then you just dive into like what it actually could mean. I feel like with thinking outside the box, the best thing to do is just to practice questions, and then once you understand the sort of things that you can actually talk about, you'll just naturally uh, I guess, build your understanding of how to approach those particular questions. I mean, because it is outside of the box questions, there's not really like a way to, I guess, there's not really like a right or wrong answer, really. And really, the best way to actually do those sort of questions is to probably practice them, I would say. But always think and analyze instead of like saying words without having much thought with that. Hopefully that somewhat makes sense what I'm saying. Um, but yeah, all right. So yeah, anyway, with the hot topic questions, so they're obviously designed to see if you have like understanding of what's going on, but also to assess your moral compass and to see if what you believe or what you understand about healthcare aligns with the GMC or the GDC. And generally, the structure is explaining your understanding of the situation, what are the arguments for something, and what are your arguments against that idea, and then given a conclusion by weighing the pros and cons, or maybe even compromising, because sometimes compromising could be the best option in your opinion as well. But I would say generally there's not really a right or wrong answer as long as it's moral what you're saying. Like if you're saying, oh, I don't know, I believe this because I want to kill someone, like that's obviously not going to be an acceptable thing to say. So as long as you can justify what you're saying morally and also using the pros and cons, like weighing the pros and cons, then that's completely fine. Okay. So an example question could be, what is your understanding of robotics and healthcare? And will robotics replace doctors and dentists? We won't go through this question because of time. But anyway, so the last question types calculations, they're not really common. Only some universities do it, but they do have some universities that do these at MMIs. So it's definitely important to be aware of it. Generally, the questions aren't difficult, but you're expected to do it under timed conditions, so you have to do it quite quickly. So an example question could be a drug degrades at the rate of 4% per hour, and if a dose contains zero point 0.2 grams, how much of the drug remains after 3 hours in milligrams? So, I mean, you can obviously see the maths isn't exactly hard, but doing it in uh, time conditions and having to potentially do it in like a minute, and also often without a calculator, could make you feel under pressure, and that's when you can make mistakes. But kind of the purpose of this is, can you handle the pressure, the time conditions, and also being accurate as well? What's the question? Can you bring up case studies you learned if it? Yes, absolutely. Bring up case studies that you've learned or heard about. Like that's definitely good because that shows knowledge and understanding of a situation, and it definitely could help you get more marks at an interview for sure. So, I mean, if I could go back to this question on robotics, like if you can name like potential robotic stuff or even just general ideas of how robotics could be used in healthcare, like that can always help with answering those particular questions for sure. Um, but yeah. Uh, and in terms of this question, by the way, if anyone's wondering how to answer it, you would do 0. I mean, obviously it needs to be in milligrams, so I'd probably convert this to milligrams. So that'd be 200 milligrams, and then it's degrading at a rate of 4% per hour. So because it's percentage decrease, that's compounding, you would do 0.96. You multiply it by 0.96 and then do it to the power of 3 because it's 3 hours. But yeah, the questions aren't particularly hard. It's just doing it under time conditions and without a calculator can make it a bit more difficult. I expected to talk through your work. Okay, so how will these calculation questions work? So if it is like, I mean, it depends. Like sometimes they just give you a sheet and they just expect you to do it in time conditions, and there's not an examiner checking your work or anything. They'll just mark it like once the station is done, if that makes sense. Or like that they won't ever like tell you like how well you have done. You have to in panel interviews, yes, you do, especially like the Cambridge slash Oxford interviews. You do, yeah. Which university gave the sheet? Wait, what do you mean the sheet? Oh, gave. Oh no, I can't say. I can't say. I know what you're saying. Like, no, I can't say. I'm sorry. um, I mean, what I could talk about is so with MMI Trainer, I have like one mock MMI that is basically like a sheet. So if you are willing to sign up for MMI Trainer, I highly recommend that you do. You will be able to practice this because there is universities that do this. But yeah, unfortunately, I can't like give information about specific universities because that's like part of like the thing that you have to sign like before you do the interview. Like you can't give information, but I promise you there is universities out there that do this. Anyway, so yeah, MMI Trainer. This is my website that I launched last week, and it's really good. Like I'm very happy about this, and I strongly recommend you guys have a look at this. It's basically a platform that offers several mock MMIs, and how it works is it utilizes recordings and of videos and also of yourself with automated timers, which simulates the real MMI experience. And the experience is really good. It's very accurate to the MMIs. And the good thing is with this particular format is you can do MMIs 24/7. You can do it whenever, wherever. It doesn't really matter where you do it. And there's a self-marking system which uses a detailed mark scheme, which you basically just tick lines of like I guess of content or of particular marking points that is expected of you to say, which also includes examples, and that's basically how it adds up what sort of score that you would get. And the system's really good because it ensures that there isn't any bias. Because one of the concerns that people has when like marking is that like they could be biased about how they think, or they're not really sure uh, whether they give themselves a mark or not. Um, but in terms of how it works, so you're able to save your scores. So then when you want to do the MMI again, you can obviously see what stations you struggled with and how to improve going forwards. And these detailed and these mark schemes as well are like extremely detailed. So literally every like if you're able to hit all those points, you will get max marks. Like I can assure you, like if you do hit those points for those particular questions, you will get max marks. And the uh, there's also a guide. So I have an MMI guide which is very helpful. It helps you stand out above all the other candidates. And the good thing is with this guide, it also tells you things like what to do on the day of the MMI, how to dress, how to act. And these are the sort of things that I wish I had when I applied for my interview. All of these things is based off my like personal experiences and also like, things that I know that universities are looking for. But overall, I would say this is the way to stand out above other candidates at your interview. So I would definitely uh, use MMI Trainer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly uh, go onto the link so I can kind of show you how it works. So, I mean, this is obviously like what we offer. Um, but I'm just going to quickly show you like kind of like what a station looks like. So obviously there's a quick overview of like what you need to do or whatever, and then it has a recent attempt score. But yeah, it basically tells you everything there. But this is basically how it looks like. So you're given a station prompt. So for example, you have 1 minute to consider vaccines and attitudes towards it. Like so, at this time you have reading time. You'd use this to think about things about vaccines and prepare for the station. So I would use this time to maybe think about what are the benefits of vaccines, what are the cons of vaccines, why maybe people could potentially be hesitant about vaccines, approaches maybe towards dealing with those sort of people. And then once the timer runs out, so I mean, obviously you can click station questions, but once the timer runs out, it will automatically forces you onto the station questions, which is exactly how the MMIs work. So once the timer is up, you're forced to move on to the station, basically, which we'll hopefully do here. Um, and then once this happens, so you have now your station questions, so you have your timer, and you have your questions. So there's a video of me speaking. So hopefully you guys have heard that, but it's basically addressing the concerns of a vaccine hesitant parents. So then what you do is you basically click start.
Matthew, we can't hear you or see your screen.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So basically what I was saying was once you like hear the question, you click start and then you record yourself and then you click stop. You do it for all the other questions. And then once that's done, so at the end of the MMI, obviously there's only one station because it's an example. You have your playback recordings and you listen to your recordings and you basically compare your answer to what the skills are assessed. So, for example, like, did you introduce yourself? So, if you did introduce yourself, like, or you said that you would introduce yourself to the parents, then you tick it. And then you can obviously see here, it will automatically adjust your score based on what you tick. So you go through every single line. So let's say you demonstrated effective communication of scientific information, so explaining vaccines. If you did that, then you tick it. if you encourage respectful dialogue without confrontation, let's say you didn't do that, you wouldn't take it. You kind of get the idea. So then you can kind of work out what sort of score you end up getting, and you go through every single one while listening to your playback recording, and then you'd eventually give yourself an overall score. And for let's say if you tick those boxes, you would have ended up getting 3.6 out of 5. And it's quite a simple way of just going through a bunch of MMI questions like fits real MMI and ensuring that you're accurate with what you're saying, but also ensuring that you know exactly what to say. Hopefully that somewhat makes sense. In terms of what other people has said about MMI Trainer, like they've said very great things. So these are all year 13s. There's one person who went on a gap year, um, but you can kind of see like the positive things that they say about MMI Trainer, and it is very good. And I really do recommend you guys using it for sure. Um, yeah, you can obviously have a read of all of those. Really, the main thing that they like is it simulates the mock MMI very well, and the mark the ability to self mark ensures that you know what sort of things you're supposed to talk about. So, for example, I know like some people they use AI to analyze questions from MMIs. In my opinion, I don't think that's helpful at all. I think it's important that you have an understanding of what mark schemes look like and what sort of things that interviews are looking for as well. Um, but yeah, it's very simple, but it's done very effectively for sure. Uh, because you guys all attended the talk, um, I'm offering you a one-time deal to have 50% off MMI Trainer Arena, which is if I quickly click the link so I can show you. So MMI Trainer Arena, so it usually costs £20 a month, but it will cost £10 a month if you use the discount code, and you'll get access to 10 full mock MMIs, uh, a full 10 full detailed mark schemes, and also the MMI guide that I was talking about as well. So I highly recommend that you use this. It's like by far like something that I wish that I had like when I did my interviews, and I highly recommend you use it for sure. Um, so make sure you type in this code, Aspiring Surgeons Network, if you want to use this. You can cancel the subscription whenever as well. So if you just want it for 1 month or whatever, then you can for sure. And
Also, I would
honestly,
just say one
yeah,
thing,
what's up?
was that I actually researched about MMI Trainer
Yeah.
before this talk, and I found it really, really helpful. And I feel like it would be a good opportunity to use this
Mm.
code because you stuck around and obviously you attended the seminar. So it'd be great
Yeah.
if you do use this opportunity. It could be a difference between an offer.
Yeah, it honestly could. It honestly could. And like in terms of like the cost of it, I mean, I think £10 a month is like very reasonable. But if you like really do want to use a website, but you're not able to pay £10 a month, then just let me know, and I can I can figure something out. But if you have any questions about MMI Trainer, like feel free to message me on LinkedIn, for example, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. But yeah, this code is for everyone that's here, so definitely use it, and it will definitely increase your chances of being successful at the interview. So yeah, in terms of summary, so MMIs are very hard, so definitely take it seriously and practice it a lot. Question types vary, and they're designed to test a bunch of skills to see whether you're suitable for healthcare. Make sure, if you can, attend in-person mock MMIs, but they're very hard to find. So that's also why I suggest using something like MMI Trainer. Obviously, use the code; you'll save a lot of money. And if you have any questions, message me on LinkedIn. If you have any questions in general, this is probably the time to ask me now. This could be about MMIs, this could be about the website, this could be about UCL, this could be about absolutely anything. So feel free to to ask me any questions you may have. Just gonna have a quick look, see if there's any questions. Okay, what? Okay, thank you. Is there March you meant also? I didn't. Okay, so what unis? Okay, so I didn't get 4 out of 4 offers, but what I was saying was, so every university that offered me an interview, I got an offer. So I ended up applying for Cambridge, UCL, Keele, and ARU. I got rejected from Cambridge, so I didn't get an interview at Cambridge, but I got interviews and offers at the other 3. Yeah. Hopefully that makes sense. How do you stand out at a Zoom MMI meeting? Okay, so for a Zoom one, I think it's completely the same thing. You're not obviously able to shake hands or anything, but through like a Zoom MMI meeting, you're able to still convey how genuine you are, and interviewers will definitely see that for sure. So yeah, I would definitely say basically do the exact same things as you would as a in-person MMI, but I wouldn't like worry too much about maybe, for example, some of the non-verbal communication you can't really do. So for example, you won't be able to show being at eye level, for example, because I mentioned that's something to do for non-verbal, or you're not able to show your hands as much, like because obviously you're not gonna have your hands up here when you're speaking. But I would say the strategy is exactly the same. Exactly the same for the MMIs. At the end, when the interviewers say, "Do you have any questions?" What do you? Okay, so I'm guessing this is more of a panel interview sort of thing. So they don't tend to ask you these sort of questions at MMIs, but for a panel interview, I can't lie, it's somewhat, I guess, situational / scenario based. Maybe you can ask them maybe like what sort of research they do, or what are they interested in, maybe the interviewer. Like, or they might mention in the beginning, you could ask them to tell them more about what they're interested in, or what maybe what their favorite thing about the university is. I think it really depends on the situation. That's not really a question they ask at MMIs, because MMIs are so quick. Like it's like at max maybe 8 minutes per station. You're not going to have time for those sort of questions. They'll just do whatever the station questions are, and then you move on. But for panels, it kind of depends. That's okay. Does anyone else have any other questions? I'll type in the code in the chat if anyone is interested. So if you're interested in MMI Trainer, that is the code. So this is for the MMI Training Arena, and like I said, I highly recommend that you use it for sure. But is anyone else with any questions?
One thing, how
Yes.
many, like, how many days is this code available for?
So this code is available. I think currently it's available like forever, but I think what I'll do is I'll probably end it probably end of January. I mean, yeah, I think end of January probably. So I mean, if you don't want to use it now, that's fine. But to be honest, if you're preparing for interviews, even if you haven't heard back from anyone, you probably should be thinking about preparing right now. Like if you're in year 13, like you definitely should, because you don't know whether or when you're going to be hurt, like told like when you get an interview, and often they give you like only a week's notice, if that. So you have to always be somewhat ready. How do you balance A levels and interviews? Good question. I would argue right now interviews are more important than A levels. The main reason why is like most sixth forms tend to finish their content maybe February, March time, so you have plenty of time between then until your A level exams to revise, to catch up, or whatever. At the end of the day, like you obviously need to do well in your A levels, but at this point, the thing that will stop you, no matter how well you do in your A levels, is whether you get an offer following your interviews. So I would prioritize your interviews a little bit more. I would do. I would make sure you do like your A level work. So how I'd put it is maybe you do your A level stuff anywhere between your normal school hours because you have like gaps in between lessons, most people. So you do work between 9 and 3 or 9 and 4 on weekdays, and then outside of maybe class, you do A level, you do interview stuff. Are we able to? Okay, yeah. Is there any other questions? How many hours a day to do interview prep? So I would say so when you mean interview prep, I mean like anything associated with interviews. So I wouldn't say that you need to do a mock MMI or like do like 5 mock MMIs in one day. No, I, that's not really expected. But on a real note, it's a good idea to maybe do 2, maybe 3 mock interviews, maybe a week. But in terms of interview prep in general, I'd probably say like I would probably spend maybe 8 to 10 hours a week on interview prep. And then when you get near to your interview, obviously you prioritize that even more. So that would at least double probably. Um, and then that ensures that you'll be ready for anything. Um, I guess it kind of depends on the person. If you feel really comfortable at interviews, then obviously that could look a bit different. But that's probably what I would do if I did interviews again. When you prepared what to use as MMI train, yeah. So this is the hard thing. So this is a little story time as to also why I made MMI trainer. So getting access to mock MMIs is an absolute pain in person, and when I mean a pain, especially for like where I live. Oh, I used to live in like quite a rural part of East England. I lived in a place called Kings Lynn. It's in Norfolk, and it's very geographically isolated. So in terms of mock MMIs that I did one in Norwich, which is an hour away from. So obviously I have to travel down there with a parent and stuff. But it also costed like £70 to do the mock MMI. So that's a lot of money just for one in-person mock MMI. Another one that I did, I went to Kiel, which was from King's Lynn, it's like a 2.5 hour drive because it's so hard to find mock MMIs. Even though it was a free one that was offered by the university, I still had to have my dad like drive me to Kiel and do a mock MMI. And it obviously it's very time consuming, and even though it was free, the cost of like things like petrol, you need to get food and stuff like that, like all of these things, it just makes it really expensive to do MMIs. In terms of in-person practice, I used like a MMI guide, which is quite good for, I guess, like reason understanding, like the sort of things you need to talk about and the type of questions. But it's not exactly easy to actually practice MMIs, and it doesn't really give quite the MMI feel. You can do it with another person. That's also something that I did. Um, if you know anyone else who's applying for medicine slash dentistry, or if you're, uh, I don't know, if you have any family who is in healthcare, they can help you with that as well. But honestly, I think MMI trainer is probably the best option uh, as of right now because of the problems with getting access to real MMIs like in person and stuff like that, and also you still get the feel of an actual MMI as well. And when you prepared, yeah, that, and yeah, that's basically what I did. Do you have any more questions? if you have any more questions, or if you don't have any more questions, but you come with more questions later, feel free to message me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to answer them. I am a bit slow when it comes down to answering questions, but I will eventually. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for me, Serena.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matthew. This was really helpful,
That's
and I'm
alright.
sure a lot of people found it helpful too. And yeah, thank you so much for joining this week's seminar. And yeah, I hope Matthew had a good time as well. And yeah.
I had a great time. It was a pleasure speaking to all